It is June. That means things are heating up here along the Wasatch Front. But the BYU football program intends, if this month goes the way they hope it does, that they will be the hottest team exiting the month of June and have a Big 12 contender for years to come.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, executive producer at the KSL Sports Zone in Salt Lake City, Utah, and a 13-year credentialed media member at BYU. I am your resident expert and insider as the host on this podcast. And as always, thank you to all of you for making it a part of your day. All right, let's talk BYU football right out of the chute here. We'll talk about what the month of June ahead for the BYU football program holds on the recruiting front. Then we'll talk about what the metrics say for BYU coming out of spring, and obviously the spring portal period starting to wind down. What do national metrics say about BYU's chances in the Big 12 conference, even with the Jake Retzloff situation pending? We'll get into that, and then we'll finish up by talking about BYU basketball and could a late addition to the roster pay dividends come the month of February and March next year, much like Mihailo Boskovic did for BYU this past year. We'll dig into that as well. All right, so right out of the chute here, let's talk about the month of June, because obviously it's the summer months. Obviously things are heating up. We hit, I think, a record high at 96 here along the Wasatch Front yesterday, Sunday, and crazy to think about how warm things are. But BYU football, they hope to be one of the hottest teams, if not the hottest team on the recruiting trail coming out of this month. And the way things are shaping up, they very well could be that. This month has been coming for quite some time. If you've been paying attention to recruiting for the BYU football program, they have put together a pretty stellar group of top-tier talent that's expected to visit BYU for official visits in the month of June. The month of June for a long time was only slated to be for camps. It was available for unofficial visits. But I think it was like 2, maybe 3 years ago, the NCAA changed the recruiting calendar that allowed official visits to take place in the month of June. And it's become, quite frankly, a pivotal month for top-tier programs to get guys on official visits, because a lot of them like to make their official visits before they go into the month of June. Obviously, when the prep season gets going nationwide, those guys like to have already committed and announced where they're going to be playing their college football, so they don't have that lingering over them during their senior season of high school football. So this month, guys are making visits all over the country, and BYU is no exception to that. They have set up, in particular, 2 very big weekends in the middle of the month that hopefully will pay dividends for the BYU football program. The biggest thing is the Cougars are off to an incredible start in the 2026 recruiting cycle. Last check of the 24/7 sports rankings of top recruiting classes so far, BYU is ranked 31st, and that's a great start for the Cougars. They've got 2 4-star talents in Bot Mulatalo, who they flipped from Oregon, and obviously Brock Harris, who's a fantastic 4-star tight end prospect out of Pineview High School in southern Utah. Those 2 are the headliners of this class, but you look at the rest of it, you have a Terrence Sarion, who is a highly thought of 3-star prospect, the BYU flipped from Washington, and go down the list. You have Justice Brathwaite, who's one of the earliest commits in this class. His dad, Reynaldo, was a fantastic running back for BYU. Justice is a defensive back. You look at how things are shaping up, and they're already off to a solid start. And this month, in the month of June, if BYU gets some momentum here and it starts to really snowball, the Cougars could find themselves as a top 10, top 20 recruiting class. That is the potential that is out there for BYU when it comes to this recruiting cycle and how this month is shaping up. It's headlined, obviously, by Ryder Lyons. He's expected to make his official visit to BYU the weekend of June 19th to the 20th, 21st, right in that realm. And obviously, if he were to commit to BYU, he'd be the crown jewel of this recruiting class. You don't do any bigger than a 5-star quarterback who's ranked inside the top 20 in the country. He is considered to be a franchise-type player, if that such a thing exists in college football. And even if he's planning on serving a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for 1 year, you still take him. No matter how it comes, you get a talent like that into the program, and it completely changes the complexion of what BYU means to a lot of recruits out there. I said this not too long ago on this podcast that a guy like the commitment of AJ DeBonsa for the BYU basketball program, it really opened eyes for a lot of prospects nationwide about, hey, BYU's getting this type of a kid. Why am I not looking at the Cougars? And he's obviously helped with BYU football. But you get a 5-star talent like a Ryder Lyons, even with his connections to BYU family-wise and church-wise, It's still with open eyeballs across the nation saying, okay, if BYU can garner a 5-star talents commitment, what's BYU doing right here? NIL plays a role, obviously. And obviously the transfer portal out there is something that BYU's used very well in recent seasons to bolster what is already a strong football program. But beyond a guy like Ryder Lyons, you've got other 4-star talents coming on campus. BYU's weekends ahead. So the first one I want to talk about is the weekend of June 12th through the 14th. It's the smaller of the official recruiting week, official visit weekends that are highly thought of for BYU. But you have guys like Kawe Akana, Parker Ord, Taigechi, and Matthew Mason making visits to BYU. All those guys are high-level 3-star talents. Now, Getchi is already committed to BYU as a tight end out of Colorado. But then the following weekend, June 19th through the 21st, that's kind of the big weekend. That weekend could make or break BYU in terms of the perception of the recruiting class. There is no less than, it feels like, 10, maybe 12 premier talents visiting. And a lot of guys who have already committed to the BYU football program are also going to be visiting that weekend. You can include the likes of Keneal Sweetwine is in that group, PJ Takitaki, Batmu Latalo. Who else? I believe you also include, so you look at it, you also have Brock Harris visiting that weekend. So guys who are already committed, they'll be rubbing shoulders with the Ryder Lyons of the world. A Jax Tanner, who a lot of people think is on the verge of becoming a 4-star offensive lineman out of the state of Idaho. You have the Pula twins, Jaron and Keenan, who are now going to be playing at Lone Peak High School this year, who have been committed to UCLA for quite some time, but could be flip commits. Adam Bywater, brother of Ben Bywater, making an official visit from Olympus High School. Tommy Tofi, who not that long ago is a highly thought of offensive lineman out of Northern California, added BYU to his official visit list. It just goes down the list and you look at these and say, okay, if BYU can capitalize, and I just barely scratched the surface of some of the guys on that list. Devon Eka's on there, Taimane Purcell, Isaiah Wong, Lopeti Moala. There is a ton of talent. And you're probably wondering, well, okay, what kind of talent are they? Well, all of them 3-star at minimum, but a lot of them are guys who, if they continue to develop over the summer and they have standout senior seasons, some of them can find themselves in 4-star territory before long. These are the type of talents the BYU and BYU fans, by extension, for years have longed of bringing to BYU and committing in droves. They're off to an incredible start with the 2026 cycle. Like I said, they're already top 50, top 40 with 31 being the ranking right now. But if you come out of these 2 weekends, and particularly the middle part of this month, and I know that if I recall correctly, they were saying that Talanoa Ili, who's a 4-star linebacker prospect himself, visited this past weekend. It's going to be a busy month for BYU, but if they can capitalize on it, they could find themselves easily sitting inside the top 20 in the recruiting rankings. And those are the type of classes that will make BYU a force in the Big 12, if not an outright contender for years to come. It's the type of talent that, once again, we've wanted to see BYU have. And there have been a lot of guys over the years when BYU was independent and said, hey, I love BYU, but simply put, I want to play Power 4 football. At the time it was Power 5, now it's Power 4. And now the BYU can offer that, you're seeing things flip a little bit. There's a lot of momentum on BYU's side. And this month, in the month of June, I include all of it under the possibilities list, but I really think this month could be pivotal to BYU's future as a Big 12 contender. It's kind of put up or shut up time. And if they can capitalize on it, you can very well find BYU being one of those teams that's talked about coming out of this official visit season at the end of the month as one of the hottest teams across college football. All right. So that's the future for the BYU football program. What's the present look like? Well, analytics out there have been emerging. They come out every so often, but a lot of them come out after different periods of the year. Well, post-spring, what did Bill Colony's SP Plus number say for BYU? What does it say about the Big 12 by extension? We're going to dig into those next as we roll on right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Monarch Money. Now, have you ever checked your bank account and wondered, hey, where in the heck did all my money go? Well, between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, and it feels like a bevy of other outlets, it's easy to lose track of that money, and that's where Monarch Money comes in as your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances and help you, simply put, stay in control of your money without your money controlling you. It's not just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. You stop just managing your money and actually start building wealth growth along the way. And the best part is managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. Track all of your shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without all the stress that money can bring into those relationships. So take control of your finances and do it with Monarch Money. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, promo code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. And once again, get started today at monarchmoney.com. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And as always, thank you to all of you. We like to call our everydayers right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, because as we like to say, it's your team every day. If you have not done so already, please subscribe to the show. Like it on YouTube here. I'm pointing down right where you click that like button, and make sure you subscribe, rate, and review it if you're watching this or listening to it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Leave us a note. We appreciate any and all feedback we get, even in the YouTube comments. No matter how you guys support the show, it's much, much appreciated. All right. So we just talked about what the future for the BYU football program could be after this month. Well, what is the future in the immediate future for BYU football hold? Well, according to the SP Plus numbers, BYU's in line to be fairly competitive in 2025. And I think we all kind of expected that, and obviously got a little bit of a wrench thrown into it with the undetermined situation with Jake Retzloff. And any of you are coming to today's show wanting for an update on it, it's pretty quiet. And I think it'll remain quiet for a little while here, if not maybe all summer. And that's unfortunate. I think the next time you may get a comment on it of any variety, it'd probably be a no comment, but a comment would be at the annual BYU Media Golf event that Kalani Sitake hosts at the end of this month. I think it's the final week of the month. And that may be the first time. And maybe even then, you don't get anything. We don't hear anything really till training camp. But beyond that, what do the metrics say out there for BYU football? And these are hard numbers. Now, if you don't know who Bill Connolly is, he is one of the foremost experts when it comes to analytics in college football. He has pioneered a whole lot of digging into numbers and trying to essentially do math to prognosticate how college football is going to go. Now, that sounds super nerdy, and it is super nerdy, but the nice part is his numbers, more often than not, tell a pretty strong, or give a pretty strong indication of what the future holds, at least for an upcoming season. Now, in BYU's post-spring SP Plus rankings, the Cougars are ranked 27th overall. Now, the SP Plus numbers are essentially trying to tell what the future is going to be. So they believe right now that BYU is just outside the top 25 if the season were played out and these numbers held true. They have an 11.5 rating, including a 29 ranking on offense, number 30 on defense, and number 10 on special teams. So they're pretty balanced across the board, offensively and defensively, and obviously their special teams. It was elite last year. There's no doubt about it. And even losing a guy the caliber of Keelan Marion, apparently those numbers have not been affected too much here. Where does BYU check in the Big 12 with that 27th overall ranking? Well, it has them fourth. The top-rated team is Kansas State at number 18, which is a little bit concerning because we have talked a lot about needing a Big 12 team to really emerge among the nation's elite. Well, that's not what that says right there, because that has Kansas State number 18, defending champion Arizona State's number 22, and then Texas Tech is one spot in front of BYU at number 26. If you look at the overall Big 12 rankings and these SP Plus figures, the Big 12 is actually pretty balanced. Number 18 is the high for Kansas State. The low is number 66 Cincinnati. So they're all top 70 across the board. And in the top tier, if you want to call it that for BYU, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Half of the league is between number 18 and number 35, where you find the Baylor Bears. If you're wondering about Utah as BYU's arch rival, they're 4 spots behind the Cougars at number 31. And I think that the numbers here are matching up with the odds makers out there, including our friends at FanDuel, who believe that half of the league, the top half of the league, have over-under win totals of 7.5 or 8.5 wins. Now, there's some other out there who have pushed them as high as 9.5. I think for Texas Tech has got a 9.5 on some other books. But simply put, the metrics, the odds makers, they believe that this league, speaking of the Big 12, is going to cannibalize itself at the top of the league if what these numbers say are true. What are the chances that BYU can emerge from the fray? Well, number one, you need to know about the Jake Retzloff, what his status is going to be to really prognosticate that fully. But at the same time, that means that this could be anybody's game in the Big 12 conference. Could it hurt them in the college football playoff chase? Absolutely it could, because once again, these are projecting what they think the top 25 is going to be. And at number 18, to have your top rated team there, that means that you are not necessarily considered to be among the nation's elite. And that's a concern because that means that you have a league out there, speaking of the Big 12, that might be panned a little bit by some of those, talking heads that are a little more influenced by some of the conferences, most notably the SEC and the Big 10. Now, to back this up here, it says the Big 12 has half of the Big 12's teams are in the top 35, but that's behind the SEC, which has 12 in the top 35, and the Big 10 that has 9. The other thing is there are 10 SEC teams ranked ahead of the first Big 12 team. The Big 10 has 4, and the ACC has 2. So if you're going by the numbers, the SEC, according to SP Plus, is supposed to be pretty elite this year. But I think that obviously could be flipped on its head in a way, because I think the Big 12, with as balanced of a league as it is, it could emerge as a stronger league by having maybe one team, if it were to become that supernova, just really take off, they'd emerge from a pretty strong top to bottom league. Whereas you look at some of the others outside of the SEC, the Big 10's only got 4 in front of the Big 12. That means that you have programs out there that are dragging these other conferences down, and that could help the Big 12 have a leg up. I know that sounds counterintuitive to maybe some of you, but I really do think that the balance of the Big 12 here is going to benefit it in the long run, even if it may take a hit in the short run. Let me kind of try and restate that in a way that's saying that even if the Big 12 right now, yeah, we do have maybe the champion, maybe scrapes its way to 10 wins. Maybe they're 10-3, they're 9-3 out of the regular season, but they go 10-3 with a Big 12 conference championship win. They're going to find themselves in the Big 12, in the college football playoff, maybe as the lone representative from the league. But in time, I think as the Big 12 continues to kind of really beat up on each other and they kind of level each other up in a way, that over time, maybe the Big 12's depth and the breadth of the strength of the league could benefit itself. And then maybe 2 or 3 years down the line, you have 2 or 3 teams that emerge and they become elite teams and they're competing more favorably on a national level. It may not happen this year, and I hope it does. I'll be very blunt. I want to see at least 2 teams from the Big 12 make the playoff this year. It was cool to see Arizona State go toe-to-toe with Texas last year, but to only have one representative in the playoff didn't sit well with me. And you'd want, obviously, to avoid the talking heads out there saying, see, the SEC is great, the Big 10's great. That's all we really need in this sport. No. We want to see teams emerge, and BYU has that opportunity. With or without Jake Retzloff, the metrics say the BYU should be fairly strong. Now, I'd like to ask Bill Connolly. I may send him an email because I've had some interaction with him in the past. I may see if he has a feel for how the numbers may pan out if Jake Retzloff is available versus if he's not. And I am interested to see if that could change things. But the bigger point is that these numbers sure feel like BYU is right there among the best in the Big 12. But at the same time, the Big 12 could be pretty topsy-turvy along the way. That would be the very interesting part about this, to see where things ultimately pan out. And if these numbers hold true and the Big 12 is pretty balanced, or if we do see a team, maybe it's an Arizona State, maybe it's Texas Tech, heck, maybe it's BYU, they come to the forefront. That'd be fun to see, but only time will tell if that is right, or if what I am thinking in my head is just complete baloney. And well, time will tell. We're now 89 days away from BYU kicking off the season. I think we're 82 days away from week 0 action. That would include Farmageddon being played over in Dublin with Iowa State and Kansas State squaring off. So it's not far off, folks. Get ready for it. And the numbers say we should be in for a fairly entertaining Big 12 season that BYU is right in the mix of as one of the top contenders among the bunch. All right, coming up next, we'll finish up today's show on the basketball front. Kevin Young made a very interesting comment to Mitch Harper at Big 12 spring meetings over last week, and I wanted to latch on to one part of it. I think they could show what last year meant for the BYU basketball program because of a late addition, and what maybe BYU might be thinking with another roster slot still available for the Cougars, and we'll get into that next as we roll on right here on Locked On Cougars. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you have not done so already, what are you waiting for? Sign up for the Locked On Cougars Inside Group, get the inside scoop on all things BYU sports. The best part is you get a 2-week free trial, and it's just $5 a month after that to be a part of the group. And the best part is the updates come to your phone in the form of a text message. Does not get much more direct than that. And obviously, you can fire back with your thoughts as well. And Always appreciate all of you who are in the Insiders group and hope that many more of you will be joining us in the days and weeks to come as you gear up for what should be a pretty exciting school year ahead for the BYU Cougars. All right, so last week at the Big 12 spring meetings, my good friend, my compatriot over at KSL Sports, Mitch Harper, was in Orlando for the Big 12 spring business meetings, and he caught up with Kevin Young, BYU basketball coach, and the question was asked because it was just before we found out officially that Kennard Davis Jr. had signed with BYU. So that was the 14th of the 15 roster slots that BYU is projecting to be allotted if and when this house settlement ever gets settled, which, by the way, the house settlement, like the whole thing's supposed to go into effect on July 1 if it's settled. We're at June 2nd, so we're like 28 days away from that going into effect, and we still have no settlement. Good times. Way to go, college football. Way to leave it till the last second. But nonetheless, and I know that's the judge. Obviously, she has to issue her ruling. But BYU basketball has been operating under the premise that they will have 15 roster slots to work with going forward. And Kevin Young told Mitch Harper that they have been obviously looking at all options as to what to do with that final roster slot. And he said something that I thought was very curious. He said, we've essentially looked through the transfer portal and we feel like we've gotten everything we need to get out of that. But we are looking at potentially bringing guys back from maybe last year's squad. But we've also identified prospects in the European or worldwide market that we're tracking. Let me take you back. It was August last year, and I was sitting at my desk at the KSL Sports Zone when reports started emerging that a guy named by the name of Mihailo Boskovic had enrolled at BYU and had signed with the Cougars. This is in August, remind you, and this is just before BYU is starting their fall semester. It might have even been early September, but nonetheless, the point remains that we went through the entire summer last year with BYU, and they put together a fairly strong roster. We were talking about the likes of Jaeger Demon, Cannon Catchings, what Richie Saunders might do as he returned, Dallin Hall. Remember, all the guys from last year's squad, there was a lot of excitement about it. But then this name pops up, Mihailo Boskovic, and he signs with BYU. He'd been playing overseas. At one point, it entered the NBA draft, was a sweet shooting big man, a stretch four, and you thought was, okay, maybe this guy could round out this roster, and what could he offer? Well, the season kind of progressed, and Mihailo found himself really buried on BYU's bench, and really didn't carve out a role for himself until, remember, that West Virginia game that BYU put together that what began a 9-game win streak. Well, BYU inserted him into the lineup in that game because they really had nothing else going for them, and it really kind of lit a fire. And Boskovic, speaking of Mihailo, he really took on a bigger role as the rest of the season progressed. He played critical minutes as a stretch four. In emergency situations, he'd come in as a 5 to really protect the rim as best he could. It's not a role that he's necessarily cut out for, but it kind of indicates to me that we may be looking at another summer of essentially standing by while BYU kind of waits out and looks around, and then maybe come July or August, all of a sudden the name emerges as, hey, BYU is signing insert European or essentially anywhere else in the globe, signs this player out of the European or international market. I think it's a pretty savvy move for BYU because there's a lot of unsettledness right now with rosters because we're in the offseason for most of the pro leagues out there, and that's what Mihailo Boskovic, Jaeger Demon. When you come over from overseas, you're playing for these European teams who are trying to finalize their rosters. And could a guy find himself maybe not in the mix with his club and decide, hey, I've still got some eligibility with regards to the NCAA. Maybe I want to go try my hand at playing college basketball. That's where I think BYU could wind up filling out this final roster slot of the 15 they have. And could he have the same type of impact down the line that Mihailo Boskovic did? I would love that. It'd be an incredible story for the second straight year that BYU brings a guy in late out of call it the international market, whatever you want to term it. And down the line, even though they didn't play a role right from the get-go, maybe at some point during the Big 12 season, they become a critical cog that is a part of BYU's success as the next season plays out. That's what I'm hoping this story can be. Now, I have been a broken record on this. I still feel like BYU's front court depth is a concern. I've heard some promising things about Hadim Mboop with his ability to maybe play the 5 spot or at least the 4 spot and help protect the rim, because looking at the film from BYU's practices, he's filled out his frame and he looks absolutely jacked. And if he's 6'9", 230 pounds, yeah, he could be a rim protector. But could there be a guy on the international market who's a 6'11", 7 foot big who can protect the rim? That's what I'd be looking for if I was BYU. And even if, like I said, they're not a guy who's completely what you want, it's the 15th guy on the roster. You're not necessarily counting on them coming in and being a part of an 8 or a 9-man rotation of a team that could find itself playing. Feels like the floor is the Sweet 16, maybe a Final Four. But if you can find a guy that could come in and play some spot minutes, let's say you find yourself in a game where a guy like Keba Keita finds himself in foul trouble and you're having issues protecting the rim, you insert this guy. If he's a rim protector, he could end up being a critical cog to help BYU in some small way. You're not, like I said, you're not looking for a guy. If you can find it, great. But if you're not necessarily looking for a star player, because if that star player existed, I would imagine that BYU with its NIL prowess and the like probably would have already been on this player. But maybe there is a player out there that they're kind of monitoring. And as rosters get settled with these European teams or literally worldwide, they start to kind of settle on things. Maybe that player is considered expendable by its team, by their team, and you could capitalize on that. Speaking of BYU, Kevin Young has shown an ability, and with his coaching staff, their tentacles, I like to call it, literally stretch worldwide. We have guys like Will Voigt who've coached around this globe. You've got guys like who else am I thinking of? Even Chris Burgess, for example. Burgess has worked all over the country. He may not have worked internationally, but he's played internationally. Chris has got connections with teammates from all his years overseas playing basketball that could lead to relationships that obviously could benefit BYU. There may be a guy that Chris played with who's a coach now in some league over in Europe or elsewhere. I know that Kadeem Mboop came from the NBA Africa Academy, and I think it was Will Voigt, if I'm not mistaken, had that connection there. And you can use those to talk to coaches and say, hey, who do you got out there? And then we say, hey, this kid's been overlooked by everybody. Look at this kid. And once again, if it pans out the way that Mihailo Boskovic did, that's a low risk and will ultimately turn into a pretty high reward addition for the BYU basketball program, because Mihailo was coming in as a guy that was a junior. He's got 1 year left now at BYU, and he'll take on a bigger role this year. But when he arrived at BYU, he was pretty lightly thought of what he ultimately was going to inject to this BYU lineup. But then as the season played out for BYU, he took on a bigger role as he learned what he could do with this BYU roster, what Kevin Young learned he could do for the BYU basketball program. It played out pretty darn well. And I would love to see history repeat itself, and we'll see what happens. But it was interesting to hear him say that they've identified, they feel like some guys on that international market. And yeah, they could not, they could be guys you're waiting on signing until maybe as late as August, just before school and the semester begins. But even if you have to wait that long, if it's the same type of caliber of guy as what Mihailo ended up being for Kevin Young and company, it's worth the wait. All right, that'll wrap it up for today's edition of the podcast. As always, you guys are the best. Cannot thank you guys enough for your support. I keep finding out just different connections I have with this podcast. It's incredible the reach it's got, and I appreciate any and all interaction I get with the show. And the nice part is all of you really mean the world to me individually, even if I don't shout you out nearly as often as I should. Maybe I should do it more, but nonetheless, thank you as always for making Locked On Cougars a part of your day. Thank you for making it your first listen of the day, in fact. And as always, thank you for being everydayers right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.